The pale light of dawn crept over the red dunes, casting long shadows across the arid expanse of the Kalahari. Dr. Amina Patel stepped out of the canvas research tent and breathed in the crisp, dry air. Around her, the desert stirred to life. A distant pair of gemsbok silhouettes drifted across the horizon, and a lone yellow mongoose darted between clumps of acacia. Amina adjusted her wide-brimmed hat and checked her wrist altimeter, 930 meters above sea level, before scanning the makeshift camp sprawled behind her. 5 canvas tents, each anchored by heavy sandbags, formed a semicircle around a solar panel array tilted to capture the sunrise. Nearby, weather sensors ticked off temperature and barometric pressure readings, streaming data back to the laptop inside the main tent. Amina's assistant, Thabo Mokoena, emerged yawning from his tent, coffee mug steaming in hand. He waved to the burrow entrance mere meters away, where the resident Meerkat mob, led by their sentinel, a sleek female named Naya, stood alert atop a low termite mound. "Good morning, Dr. Patel," Thabo called softly, careful not to startle the wildlife. "Naya's already on duty." Amina smiled and sank to one knee beside the mound. Nia's taut posture, back straight, head high, signaled vigilance. The sentinel's small, round ears twitched as she scanned every direction. Behind her, 2 subordinate sentinels rotated into position, while the rest of the mob foraged cautiously on the perimeter of the ABCD transect grid. Amina extracted her handheld audio recorder and placed it in the soft sand, its microphone pointed at the sentinel mound. "Let's get today's baseline," Amina murmured, pressing record. Within seconds, the usual chorus of distant chirps and scratchings filled the microphone, a symphony of meerkat social life. In the shade of her wide brim, she consulted her notebook. 6:12 a.m. Baseline sentinel call pattern. Single chirp every 30 seconds. Thabo unloaded the last of the field gear. Motion sensor cameras, pitfall trap markers, and a drone with thermal imaging mounted on its undercarriage. "All systems go," he reported, dragging a solar rechargeable battery pack toward the command tent. Inside, Amina logged the initial readings. Temperature, 22 degrees Celsius, humidity, 12%, wind speed, 4 kilometers per hour. Everything pointed to a typical, scorching Kalahari day ahead, until she noticed an unnerving trend in the barometer, a sudden drop of 5 hectopascals in the last hour. She tapped the screen thoughtfully. "That's faster than a thunderstorm front," Amina said. "But the sky's clear." They gathered around the weather station's display, eyebrows knitting in concern. A sandstorm brewing could disrupt their entire research schedule and risk the delicate electronics they had spent weeks installing. Yet as they debated whether to launch the drone early, their attention drifted to the sentinel mound. Nia's usual soft chirp was absent. Instead, the female sat rigid, gaze fixed on the distant dunes, silence rippling through the mob like a held breath. Amina exchanged a look with Thabo. "Let's trust the meerkat's instincts," she said, already tapping notes into her tablet. "If they sense something, we need to pay attention." Minutes later, as the sun climbed higher, Amina hoisted her pack and checked the recorder. Beneath the normal bustle of meerkat life, an undercurrent of tension pulsed through their calls. In the hush of the Kalahari morning, the smallest sentinel had already sounded her alarm, though no human instrument yet knew what lay beyond the shimmering heat haze on the horizon. By late morning, the mercury on the weather station climbed past 45 degrees Celsius, and the air above the dunes shimmered in distortion. Yet the usual trade winds that brought relief across the sandy flats were conspicuously absent. The anemometer registered 0 kilometers per hour, its vane frozen in place, as though the desert itself held its breath. Amina wiped sweat from her brow and frowned at the data display, where the barometer had plummeted another 3 hectopascals within just 30 minutes. Thabo emerged from the command tent, draping a damp cloth over his neck. "Not a whisper of breeze," he said, voice taut with unease. He tapped the wind sensor with a gloved finger. "All our instruments say calm, but look at that horizon." He swept an arm toward the western dunes, where a faint, trembling mirage blurred the skyline into a wavering haze. Amina snapped her tablet open and overlaid the sudden pressure drop on their regional weather model. This isn't normal diurnal variation, she muttered. It's a low-level front, but there's no cloud cover. Something's coming. She glanced toward the burrow, where Nia's sentinel perch looked deserted. A low trill of alarm calls rose from the foraging group. A rapid series of high-pitched chirp, 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 cutting through the heat-hazed stillness. The meerkats froze at the burrow entrance as Nia's subordinate sentinels joined in a chorus of urgent calls. They beat ground with forepaws in a staccato warning rhythm, then retreated inside the tunnel network. One by one, the entire mob disappeared underground, leaving only a scattering of disturbed sand at the entrance. Thabo and Amina exchanged wide eyes. "That's a storm sentinel pattern," Thabo whispered, recalling the sand tracker's descriptions. "But what kind of storm?" Amina tapped through her field guide. "Could be a haboob, a sudden sandstorm with no visible telltale clouds. The meerkats are picking up pressure waves we can't feel." She grabbed her radio. "Check remote camera feeds. See if the western cams show any dust movement." Moments later, the infrared drone cam feed flickered on her tablet. A rolling wall of warmer tone air creeping over the dune crest, just beyond visual range. No swirling eddies, just a uniform surge of warmer, dust-laden wind. On the ground, the solar panels hummed as fine grit began to settle on their surfaces, dimming their output. Amina's jaw set. "Time to move. Now," she ordered. "Shut down the sensors, secure the tents, and get to the storm shelter." Thabo nodded, already pulling down tent flaps and lashing them with sand-filled ties. The station, though built for isolation, was not yet secured for an imminent sand wall barreling toward them at hurricane speed. In that unnerving, windless moment, human and meerkat alike recognized the same silent threat, one born of simmering heat and shifting air. And as the first wisps of dust flickered at the dune's lip, Dr. Patel realized the true value of the smallest sentinel in the Kalahari. Trust its warning or be swept away. A low rumble vibrated through the still air, faint at first, but growing unmistakably into a rolling growl. Amina's pulse quickened as she gripped her tablet, watching the drone camera feed flare with shifting ochre tones beyond the dune crest. Suddenly, from the heart of the meerkat burrow, came Nia's cry. A shrill, piercing peep, peep, peep that cut through the desert silence like an urgent alarm bell. Each chirp lasted barely 0.2 seconds, delivered in rapid succession with less than 0.2-second pauses. Then, without hesitation, Nia unleashed a sustained ee trill, lasting nearly 1 full second, her tiny frame quivering atop the termite mound. At once, the rest of the mob froze in place. The subordinate sentinels, two vigilant siblings, dropped their foraging and joined in a chorus of high-pitched peep, peep, peep calls, echoing Nia's rhythm. A collective quiver ran through the group as each meerkat beat the ground with trembling forepaws in a staccato warning. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, 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 the tempo matching their frantic chirps. Within seconds, the entire colony, some 20 sentinels strong, scurried back into the safety of the burrow network, their backs disappearing down the tunnel entrances as cloud-like plumes of sand puffed around them. Amina and Thabo watched in awe and growing dread as jackals grazing nearby halted mid-stride, ears pricked, then flipped tail and darted off toward distant shrubs. A handful of springbok, their heads low to the ground, froze as well. A series of soft, snick-snack hoofbeats later, they bounded away in tight, bounding leaps. Even ground squirrels, caught unawares, darted for crevices in the sandy soil. Outside the burrow entrance, the first grains of the sandstorm whipped past in a spray of stinging grit. The world tilted into motion. Rust-colored wind roared down the dune flank, and within moments, visibility plunged to mere meters. Yet, beneath the howling gale and swirling dust, Nia's urgent sentinel call remained the clear, unyielding signal that had alerted every creature in its path, from the tiniest meerkat to the wary jackal, that the desert's fury was imminent. In that singular, insistent alarm, human and wildlife alike found their cue to seek refuge before the sand-laden wind engulfed them entirely. In the safety of the main tent, away from the swirling dust, Amina replayed the high-definition audio recorded earlier that morning. The waveforms danced on her tablet screen. 3 sharp spikes, each zero point 0.2 seconds long, followed by a plateau of rhythmic noise, then a continuous trill cresting at 1 second. She zoomed in on the initial chirps and marked their exact timestamps. 08:23, 15.12, 08:23, 15.45, 08:23, 15.000, 15.78, with interchirp intervals of 0.33 seconds. 3 rapid chirps, each 0.2 seconds, then a 1-second trill, she murmured, annotating the spectrogram with digital ink. Thabo pored over the regional wind shear model on the adjacent screen, overlaying the barometric drop, 8 hectopascals over the past 2 hours, with known gust front velocities. If we assume the Sentinel call corresponds to the moment the storm wall first crested the dune, we can estimate its bearing, he said, drawing an arrow across the digital map from their station toward grid square C4. They consulted field notes from the sand trackers, who had described this exact call pattern. 3 sharp warnings to take cover when storms approached from the southwest. Amina cross-referenced the intervals with the elevation profile of the western dunes. The precise height of 45 meters would delay the wind's arrival by 2.5 seconds, matching their recorded pause before the sand first hit their instruments. Thabo nodded, eyes alight. So Nia's call alerted us about 2.5 seconds before the front actually broke over the crest, giving us a crucial head start. Amina saved the annotated audio file as Meerkat Storm Alert 0903 and overlaid the storm's predicted path, bearing 240 degrees from north, onto their GIS map. She calculated the arrival time, 8:38 a.m., in exactly 15 minutes. We need to treat this pattern as a live early warning algorithm, she declared. With that, she drafted new protocols for desert research. Integrate Sentinel call sensors into standard weather stations and automate evacuation alerts based on biological cues. Securing this proof, they transmitted a brief report via satellite uplink to the Marine Institute back in Cape Town, attaching the audio clip, annotated map, and wind shear analysis. As the uplink confirmed delivery, a tremor of relief passed through Amina, knowing they had decoded the desert's most precise barometer. The tiny, insistent voice of Nia, the Meerkat Sentinel. By 8:24 a.m., only 90 seconds remained before the leading edge of the haboob would crest the nearest dune. Amina threw her tablet into her pack, slung the drone controller across her chest, and barked orders. Thabo, launch the UAV now. Give us a bird's-eye view of the front. Sophia, secure all panels and shut down the weather station. Thabo sprinted to the launch pad, fingers flying over the tablet's touchscreen as the quadcopter's rotors whirred to life. Through the tent's flap, the first wisps of sand lifted over the dune crest, an orange haze creeping toward them. Moments later, an aerial feed flickered onto Amina's tablet, a rolling wall of ochre, at least 200 meters high, surging forward in kinetic waves. The drone's altitude gauge held steady at 50 meters, its thermal camera distinguishing cooler pockets of air, pockets they could use as brief breathing corridors once the storm hit. Meanwhile, Sophia and Thabo dashed from tent to tent, their movements choreographed by urgency. They looped heavy nylon straps around each solar panel frame and ratcheted the sand-filled tensioners tight. Canvas flaps that once billowed gently now thrashed like storm-tossed sails. Sophia's reinforced grommets withstood the onslaught as she hammered the final peg into the hard sand. Thabo collapsed the drone's landing skid and tucked it into its padded case just as a gust rattled the command tent's support poles. Amina herded the research dogs, 2 kelpies trained for tracker scent work, into the reinforced kennel built into the burrow's lee. The dogs snarled at the wind-whipped sand, but settled once Amina slipped into the chamber's cool interior. She snapped the latch shut, muffling the outside roar to a distant, rhythmic pounding. The emergency lantern clicked on, casting a soft amber glow over the concrete floor where Thabo and Sophia joined her, breathing hard. Outside, the storm struck like a living wall, a suffocating curtain of airborne grit driven by hurricane-force gusts. The temperature plummeted as sand replaced air, and for the next hour, the researchers pressed themselves against the kennel's thick walls, counting the seconds by the storm's crescendos. Twice, the roar abated to a low howl. Moments when Thabo peered through the slitted vent and glimpsed the burrow's entrance, half buried in drifting dunes. Each lull reminded them how close they'd come to catastrophe. When, at 9:20 a.m., the tempest finally spent itself, and the kennel's steel hatch rattled in the softened sand, Amina exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd held. Emerging into a transformed landscape, she found the station buried under half a meter of fine red dust. Solar panels obscured, cameras blinded by grit, and the once clear horizon smeared in monochrome. Yet, remarkably, every tent remained anchored, every sensor mount intact. Above them, Nia and her mob tentatively surfaced from the burrow, whiskers dripping fine particles as they assessed the calm. The Sentinel's triumphant chirp rang out, a soft but unmistakable peep, as if to say, "You heeded my warning and endured." Amina knelt to stroke Nia's warm fur, gratitude flooding her chest. In the heart of the Kalahari's fury, it was the smallest Sentinel's call that had given them the head start they needed to survive. The first hammer blow of the haboob struck with suffocating force. Outside the reinforced burrow, the wind screamed like an ancient beast, driving walls of ochre-tinted sand that blotted out all light and sound. Amina slammed the heavy steel hatch shut, the latch clicking with finality as the world beyond dissolved into a swirling vortex. Inside, the temperature plummeted from scorching to cool, and the din of the storm was reduced to a muffled, unceasing roar. Thabo fumbled for the emergency lantern and flicked it on, casting a golden cone of light over the concrete-lined chamber. The walls, 3 feet thick and insulated against heat, vibrated with each gust. Sophia dropped her backpack beside the entrance and secured the internal bulkhead door, sealing out even the finest grains of dust. The dogs, huddled in their reinforced kennels along one wall, whimpered softly but were otherwise unharmed, testament to the foresight that had gone into designing this subterranean refuge. Amina checked her watch. 8:40 a.m. They had been underground only minutes, yet already the kennel's narrow observation slit showed nothing but a shifting haze of sand. She paced the small room, mind racing through emergency protocols. "Water ration," she called, voice echoing. Sophia produced a sealed pack of mineral water and handed Amina a rationed cup, enough for each of them to sip slowly until the storm subsided. Lightning-fast memories of the Sentinel call flooded Amina's thoughts. Nia's 3 rapid chirps and the 1-second trill that had given them precious lead time. Now, in the heart of the storm, she felt the weight of that warning keenly. She crouched by the data console, a hardened, dust-proof laptop, and tapped through the automatic shutdown logs to ensure no critical research was lost. The screens blinked safe mode, confirming all sensors had powered down just before the sandstorm engulfed the station. Outside, the thunderous pummeling of sand on the hatch reached a fever pitch. The kennel shook as though the very earth were quaking. Thabo pressed his ear to the wall, his face grim. "This is the fiercest I've ever heard," he admitted. The storm raged for nearly 40 minutes, the interval punctuated by occasional lulls, when Amina peered through the slit and saw the burrow's entrance half buried in drifting dunes. At 9:15 a.m., the onslaught began to subside. The roar dwindled to a low, persistent hiss, then to distant whispers. Sophia cracked open the internal bulkhead and peered out. The sky beyond was a muted copper haze, and the burrow's mouth lay buried up to its lintel in fine red dust. Cautiously, she unlocked the outer hatch and pulled it inward, revealing swirling motes catching the last vestiges of daylight. Amina shone a headlamp beam onto the buried entrance, illuminating the drifts and revealing a narrow tunnel, just large enough for one person to wedge through. Together they dug a path with small shovels stored by the door, each scoop of sand falling away into the churned dunes outside. Minutes later, a tunnel emerged, and Amina wriggled through the narrow opening into the transformed world. The station compound lay blanketed in half a meter of sand, solar panels buried, tents half submerged, and cameras entombed in gritty stillness. Yet every structure stood upright. Every line of sand-filled sandbags held firm. She dug out the first solar panel array, revealing unbroken glass beneath the grit. "They held," she whispered to Thabo, who was clearing the weather station's sensors. Above them, the meerkats emerged in cautious trickles, their fur dust-coated, whiskers dripping fine grit. Nia climbed to the roof of the main tent and emitted a single triumphant peep, her stance proud atop the mound of displaced sand. In that moment, Amina felt a surge of gratitude and awe. Through the howl of the haboob, it had been the Sentinel's call that had guided them to this safe haven. And now, as the survivors of the storm, they owed their lives to the smallest guardian of the Kalahari. As the copper haze of post-storm light filtered across the dune crests, Amina stood atop the cleared path to her research station, surveying the transformed Kalahari landscape. Where once firm sand lay, half-meter drifts now formed dunes against every structure. Yet the solar panels, cameras, and tents the team had secured stood intact, testaments to their rapid response. More remarkable, however, was the sight of Nia and her mob re-emerging from the burrow, fur mottled with red dust, eyes bright with resilience. Amina checked her watch. 9:45 a.m., 30 minutes since the storm's end. She knelt by the Sentinel mound, setting down her recorder. Nia climbed to the termite mound's summit, lifted her head to the west, and delivered a single clear peep, the signal that the peril had passed. The subordinate sentinels joined in a gentle chorus of chirps, their calls now ordinary rather than urgent. Inside the main tent, Thabo organized the aftermath data. He reviewed the barometric records, a 12 hectopascal drop over 3 hours, the storm's arrival at 8:38 a.m., exactly 15 minutes after Nia's alarm. He overlaid the actual storm front's position from drone footage, finding that Nia's first 0.2-second chirp had preceded the wall of sand by 10 seconds, a lead time crucial enough to secure the station. Amina compiled the field report, detailed spectrograms of Nia's call, triangulated storm bearings, and survival timelines. She noted the sand tracker's insights, that a sentinel call pattern of 3 short chirps with 0.5-second pauses, followed by a 1-second trill, reliably predicts haboob approach from the southwest. She concluded, Meerkat sentinel calls function as an evolutionary early warning system, outpacing conventional instruments in desert storm detection. Later, as the team cleared equipment and dusted off solar panels, Amina set up a motion-activated audio recorder at the Sentinel mound. She programmed it to trigger evacuation alarms in the camp whenever the 3-chirp pattern reappeared. In a final act of respect, she buried a small time capsule beneath the mound, containing her log notebook, a spectrogram printout, and a photograph of Nia on duty. That evening, as the sun sank behind the dunes and the air cooled back to 28 degrees Celsius, Amina and Thabo shared a quiet meal beneath the acacia's skeleton branches. Nia sat atop the mound, her silhouette backlit by twilight, a living guardian restored to her watch. Amina raised her cup in salute. To the smallest sentinel, she toasted softly, may we always listen to your call. In the vast, whispering silence of the Kalahari night, the lesson was clear. Sometimes the greatest warnings come on tiny paws and insistent chirps, and it is our duty to heed them.